Okay, so last week we ranked in a similar format to this on a tier list all of the main agents characters of Agents of Shield. So I guess you could call them the heroes or the main characters. And in that we included some agents that may have ended up being a villain later on, but we included them just based off of when they were a hero or a protagonist of the show. And similarly here we're going to talk about all the villains or the bad guys in Agents of Shield. I tried to include a pretty wide mix of a lot of characters, which I thought I had this ordered out, but I guess that they're not ordered properly. Not like they were when I looked a few minutes ago. But a lot of kind of minor characters from throughout the seasons are in here who might have just been in one or two episodes. There are definitely some people missing that I completely missed out on. But in terms of like major antagonists, this is pretty much everyone. Everyone who would have had somewhat of an impact on a character or would have been present for a small arc in the show or something like that. And we're going to do the same thing as with the heroes. We're going to do S, A, B, C, D. S being the greatest villains of the entire show, D being very forgettable or just bad or annoying characters, C being like, yeah, they were alright, but not really much to say on them, B being they were pretty good, but not great, A being just they were great characters. So let's get into this. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to try and do, I guess, the smaller characters first. There's a lot of villains here. There's 62, I think, total that I have here, which is a crazy amount of characters. But I guess we'll start with the really smaller characters first. And a lot of these, similar to with the agents characters we talked about last week, I'm probably gonna just skip through some of these pretty quickly where I'm like, I really don't have much to say on them. I don't know really much to talk about with them, so we'll just skip right through them. And we'll do that kind of similarly here. I'm also gonna have to pause sometimes to double check some names of these because some of these characters who are in like one or two episodes in season one and two, I'm already kind of blanking on their names. But let's start off with Camilla Reyes, who was the I don't know how to describe her. She was the really minor antagonist from the very second episode of the show, 082, when they went to Peru and part of kind of the militia there. Um, yeah, I mean, just straight off, I'm just gonna say I don't really have much, like, not a very memorable character at all. Like, didn't really leave much of an impact. This was back when the show was doing its episodic one villain an episode, then move on pretty quickly thing. So during that period, there was not a lot of memorable people or people that you would remember talking about a lot. Okay, I had to take a quick pause and add Donnie Gill because I completely forgot to put him in there. He was on the list I had, and then I just completely forgot to get an image of him. So he's in there now. Donnie Gill. Well, let's do him next. Donnie Gill, who was in two episodes of the show, was in season one and then was in season two when Hydra tried to recruit him. He's Blizzard in the comics. He was more memorable than most of the kind of the minor villains, so I'll probably put him in like a C because I just think based off of the actor, he's pretty memorable based off of things like 13 Reasons Why. And I feel like he did more than a lot of the one off antagonists. Seeing him come back was pretty cool. I would have liked if they did that more as the show went into like season 6 and 7, seeing some of the really smaller villains come back. Season 5 was great at that, at bringing in villains who you hadn't seen in a long, long, long time. Next off, I'm going to do the two characters from Bahrain. So we have the mother of the Inhuman here. I completely forgot her name. I would put her in like a D because she was super forgettable and was just kind of there to push May a little bit. But the real villain of that whole thing was the daughter, there she is, who was the actual Inhuman. And I would probably put her in a C as well, alongside Donnie, were just a little bit more memorable. But I think what makes these characters getting like as low as C or D is just that they were really only there for plot purposes to showcase why May was as messed up as she was and what went on in Bahrain. And I think they were really good at plot devices for things like that, but outside of that, not a lot to say on their characters. Next up was Marcus Daniels, I think was his name, who was I'll put him in T as well. He was the character who went after Coulson's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or whatever, the cellist in late season one. Or the actress, I think, was Amy Acker, who was in things like The Gifted and stuff like that as well, and Person of Interest, which is a great show. But Marcus Daniels, super forgettable. He just was one of the people who escaped when Ward and Hydra broke into, which shield base was they broke into? Was it the playground or the sandbox? One of those two. And they orchestrated somewhat of a prison break. And Marcus Daniels was one of the people who escaped. And I think he was the guy who Garrett was just like, make sure you give the shield agents hell or whatever, or make sure you cause havoc and chaos. And that was what he did. He was there to kind of be a bit of a distraction so that Ward could infiltrate the shield base at Providence, which again, similar to the other characters we talked about, kind of just a plot device so that there was a reason why the shield agents were away and Ward could kill Eric Koenig and could get Sky to go with him and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll go through a lot of these plot device characters first. Next, let's do Lorelai, who, as an Asgardian, I think she was way more memorable than a lot of your run of the mill villains. If you don't remember Lorelai, she was in episode 15, I want to say, which is called Yes Man, which I think that's one of the more good episodes from season one because it was coming right up to the Hydra turn in the end of episode 16, early episode 17, when we started to find out that Shield was being infiltrated. And I really liked it because her character was there to kind of push Ward. And one of my favorite moments of season one is when Ward is very briefly out of her control and he still pulls the trigger to shoot May. And it's been a debate since forever that the Shield creators confirmed is that Ward was fully out of Lorelai's control when he pulled that trigger, but he did it anyway because he saw a quick, easy way to kill May and play it off as, oops, an Asgardian was controlling me, which I think that'll just make Lorelai more interesting just based off of that, which is a little unfair to put her in a B then because it's not exactly to do with her character, it's just how good the writing on the show was at the time. But I think she was memorable as an Asgardian. It's not often we got Asgardians in the show. Next up, let's do a lot of the season 6 group. So we got Jacko first, who I think I'm just gonna put Jacko, Snowflake, and Pax all in a C. Which this is just one of the slight issues I have with season 6, is that in the first 4 or 5 episodes we're introduced to like 8 or 9 different characters, combining the villains and combining with the Shield agents. And because we're introduced to so many people at once, along with the fact season 6 was a shorter season than usual with the show, had 13 episodes instead of the usual 22. Had 13 episodes instead of the usual 22, it meant we don't really get the time dedicated to fleshing out the characters the way we usually would. And I think for that reason, Sarge's kind of supporting cast or minor characters, like the three of these guys, were just very bland and didn't leave much of an impact. Snowflake probably left the most impact just due to her fact that she was with Deke for a bit, which I guess we should probably order these by how good of villains they were as well, rather than just having them in the middle of nowhere. So I guess I'd move Snowflake up to like a high C if it wants to move. It doesn't want to. There we go. And then I'm pretty okay with that. I think Jacko was more enjoyable than Pax was. But yeah, there's not a lot to say about those characters. They were just kind of there, and then they weren't. And season 6 just feels like a weird era where it's the most like disconnected to the rest of the show, I feel like, because season 7 we're revisiting timelines, we're revisiting periods. Season 1 through 5 are very connected, but season 6 is kind of in that middle area where, because the show was so close to getting cancelled and then renewed, it meant that they kind of had to change a lot of stuff and change a lot of directions, and season 5 finished a lot of stuff up. And season 6, I know they say it's technically part 1 of a 2-part final season, with season 7 being part 2, but I just feel like season 6 is like the most outlier of a season. I'm still not sure whether it's my least favorite or season 3 is my least favorite, but it was fine. And the characters with it, they were all fine, which is kind of the best thing I can say about them. Next up, let's do Scorch, who was super briefly in season 1 in episode 5, I want to say, which was the character that got powers. Reyna was giving him centipede serum and stuff like that. I'd probably put him in a low D. Put him above Marcus Daniels. I'd put him about there, I think. Not a lot to say about his character, which I promise we'll have more to say when we get into like the bigger characters. But a lot of these people, you kind of just, they were there, blink and you miss it, they were gone. Really, season 1 was just so much focused on character storytelling and doing things with the characters that meant that a lot of the villains who would pop up were just kind of there to forward those character storylines. Speaking of character storylines, we've Christian Ward, who was Ward's brother. Similarly, I'd put him in a low C, I think, because I think he got more to do. He was in more episodes than the usual one-off antagonist. I want to say he was in 3 episodes of season 2, where he was in really early in the season, working with S.H.I.E.L.D. briefly, making a deal with them so that Ward would get transferred to him. Then Ward did get transferred, and Ward kidnapped him and brought him to the house where they grew up and the well and all that sort of stuff, and tortured him and killed him. And that was kind of that. Just kind of there to push along Ward's story and show that Ward was getting over his family trauma, so that now in the second half, of season 2, Ward could focus on just being a villain without a lot of the stuff bogging him down. Okay, I don't know how noticeable it is. I feel like it's probably pretty noticeable because I feel more tired today than I did yesterday, but I am recording this next bit on a different day. Had to stop recording yesterday, so coming in to finish off the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. villains ranking. So where do we finish? I think Lorelai was the last character we did, right? So we're going through the smaller characters first. So let's do Franklin Hall next, who was important just for kind of what he meant for the later on parts of the show. I remember everybody kind of thought he was going to be a much more important character than he was because in the comics, Franklin Hall is Graviton, and not a huge Marvel villain, definitely more C or D list than most people would think, but because of the fact he was a pretty big villain in the comics, I feel like a lot of people expected him to play an integral role in the show. And then he was in episode 3 of season 1, I want to say. The one where Sky has to infiltrate Ian Quinn's place with Grant Ward. And he was in that episode, got sucked into the Gravitonium. Nothing really happened again with him until season 5 when the Gravitonium came back and we did all the stuff with Glenn Talbot, and that was really cool. But Hall was kind of a footnote by then, and I feel like his impact on the wider Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff is important, but as a character, there's not a whole lot there with him. So I'm going to put him in a low D as well. I feel like right about there, I think, suits him because he did nothing. He's not a memorable character. It's kind of just the characters around him. Speaking of Franklin Hall, let's go with one of his associates and somebody who was a bigger character in the wider scheme of the show, Ian Quinn, who was also around Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. around the same time. And Ian Quinn was an interesting character, a recurring character for most of season 1, involved in Centipede, involved in a lot of different things, involved with the Clairvoyant, involved with Reyna. A lot of kind of the season 1 conflicts came back to him at some point, and he was never really a super interesting character. There was a deleted scene from season 1 that showed what happened to him, that showed him get sucked into the Gravitonium with him and Reyna sitting in the back of a van or something like that. And that was filmed for season 1, and then they used it as one of the post logo scenes in season 5. So it was cool how they repurposed that footage to explain what happened to Ian Quinn because we never found out what happened to him. He's also not a super great character. During season 1, I feel like if you weren't a main villain, you were kind of undercooked. I'd put him like there, I think. Right about there. Which this is such a weird list. We've got the little Inhuman girl who May had to kill, and then we've got Ian Quinn. It's an interesting list. I'm for sure. I wonder how people are going to feel about this. Like, is it going to be talked? Like, is anybody going to be like, this is really weird? Or no? I don't know. Anyway, let's keep going with some of the smaller people. Let's do Alan Nadir next, the senator from season 4, who is part of one of the few plots Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. never wrapped up, and that involves her brother, Vijay Nadir, who got Inhuman powers and had really cool Inhuman powers. I forget what they said it was. He had like survivability or something like that was essentially his power, where it was just reaction, able to keep himself alive sort of thing. And she killed him, and then, well, we think she killed him. He drops to the bottom of the ocean, he goes into an Inhuman husk on the bottom, and then we see him again in the framework, and then that's it. His actual Inhuman present day storyline is never followed up on. As far as Ellen goes, she was just kind of there to kind of push along the Watchdogs plotline and to be sort of the main U.S. government member who was against the S.H.I.E.L.D. team, which I feel like every season we have one of those. It was Talbot for the first 3 seasons, then it was Alan Nadir, then, I don't know, after that, they didn't really deal with that sort of stuff, but I'd put her in a C as well. Probably like, I think I'd put her above Ian Quinn. Yeah, we'll put her there. We'll put her there, which, I mean, I feel like I don't know how to rank that, the little Inhuman girl. Like, where do you put that? Like, what do you do with the character? I don't know. Next up, who else we got? Well, we got a Hellfire next, who was one of the Inhumans that Hive came and swayed or whatever. That's one of my. I'm gonna put all the swayed Inhumans up here. So where is Gear? There's Gear. And wait, who is who? Okay, so this guy's Guerra and this guy's Lucio, right? Am I right in that? Okay. I feel like all 3 of them are kind of similar. I'd put them in like mid-C's, honestly. Hellfire, just put him like above Donnie Gill. I'd put Gear was there for longer. I'd put him above Snowflake, I think. And Lucio, maybe like there. Spread them out a little bit. I feel like that's just really random choices on where I'm putting them. But I mean, all of them were kind of just there for the Inhuman Hive plot, and so that the Shield team had people to fight, I guess, like because we now had the Secret Warriors with Yo-Yo and Joey, and Lincoln and Daisy, we needed kind of Inhumans on the opposite side to fight. Hellfire was really cool when Ghost Rider came into the show, and we got to see some cool stuff there. Speaking of Ghost Rider, let's do like Lucy Barrow next. I think Lucy gets like a low B. There wasn't super much, and I'd probably put Eli Morrow around there as well, probably a higher B. Um, I feel like they were the most underwhelming villains of season four, Lucy Barrow and Eli Morrow. I feel like the best part about their whole arc was the Ghost Rider stuff for sure, but I do think season four, while it starts really, really, really cool, the villains it first gives us aren't the best. Plus, Ghost Rider is kind of like an antagonist, I guess, for this part of the story. I don't have him in this list, but he was kind of the antagonist of Shield in a lot of ways in those early parts of season four. Daisy kind of was as well, to be honest. But I think that they were fine. They did what they were meant to do, which was sort of push the Ghost Rider thing and bring the show into like that supernatural ghostly element. But outside of that, there wasn't a lot. I think that like those two characters are probably like the least memorable of the season four villains for sure. Next up, let's do Agent Blake. Now, Agent Blake wasn't a villain in season one. The Hydra uprising happened, and then he comes back in season three as one of the new leaders of the Watchdogs or whatever. He was just in the one episode, I think. Put him in like a high C though. I think yeah, it was cool to see him go up against Coulson and stuff like that. And there was a Lincoln thing as well where Coulson was like, Lincoln, kill him, and Lincoln's like, what? And it turns out he wasn't actually there in the first place. That was kind of cool, but again, that's not really to do with Blake himself. That's just kind of to do with like what was going on. Next, let's do Fitz's dad, Alistair Fitz. I mean, I don't think he was great, but because of the Fitz stuff, it makes him better. Like because of the attachment he has to Fitz and stuff like that. I feel bad we don't have any S characters yet, so let's do somebody who's definitely an S. I think. All right, let's do Glenn Talbot's Graviton. I think Glenn Talbot's Graviton was great. I thought that was a really cool choice, a really cool decision to make him the main villain because he was in a sort of antagonistic role in the first three seasons, a tiny bit in season four as well. But in season four, he was coming around, he was joining up with Shield. Then he gets a gunshot to the head by the LMDs, and he comes back in season five as somebody who's really messed up in the head. But he still wants to believe that Shield is good, that Coulson's the good guys, that I don't know, just a lot of great stuff like that. And then the tragic turn to have him be a villain and where he's turning on Hydra, he's trying to save the world, he's trying to stop Thanos, but he does it in the wrong way where he's doing it in a way that's going to destroy the world. And we even get that moment in the finale where Daisy goes up against him and Daisy stops him and she's like, look, Glenn, you're a good man. Look around you. Look what you're doing. You can stop this right now. You can save the world, but this is not the way to do it. And you get this split moment where you're like, is he actually gonna stop? Like, is this gonna talk him down? And then he's like, you know who gave me that talk? Hydra. And then he just, I don't know. I know he got shot up into space, and there's pretty much zero ways that he himself, like the Gravitonian's still up there, but I doubt Glenn is alive up there. But I would have loved to see them bring him back in the final two seasons in some form because I loved him as a villain. I thought it was a fantastic writing choice, and it's part of what makes season five one of my favorite seasons of television of all time, like one of my favorite watching experiences. Because just from episode one of season five, you never in a million years would have expected the final episode would have been Glenn Talbot as Graviton being the person they have to fight. Like that's just in zero ways in your brain of what could happen. Like in the first episode of season four, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the final villain of the final episode of season four is going to be Ada, because they're already establishing AI from the season three finale. They're already establishing that all that sort of stuff. It's pretty feasible that that's what the end of the season is going to be. That sure you don't know how you're going to get there, but it makes sense that that's going to be the direct line for the season. There's no way in hell you could have predicted that's with the start of season five. Glenn Talbot as Graviton is the end goal. Like that's so much crazier and so much cooler, and they made it make perfect sense. All right, let's stay on season five for a second and do some of these Kree characters. So we got, I think Falnak is the name of Kasai's brother. We got Kasai's dad, who I forget the name of. We got Sonara, and we got Kasai's. Now I'm just gonna say straight off the bat, I think Sonara is the best Kree villain on the show. I thought Sonara was actually really cool, really intimidating. The way she had her like her power things or whatever, throwing at people, her fights with the characters were really cool. Her chasing the Shield team to Earth. She barely talks, she barely does anything, but she's like the Boba Fett of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Where, I mean, I know they bring Boba Fett back in a big way in like Book of Boba Fett or in the prequels or whatever, or the Clone Wars, but in the original trilogy, Boba Fett is this character who barely talks. He's just there. He just looks cool. He looks badass. And sure, he never really does a whole lot. He looks really cool and he becomes a fan favorite character that everyone's seen more of. Sonara was kind of that for me, where she looks really cool. She looks really badass. She had this main theme music that always like blared when she'd come into a scene. And well, sure, she never exactly did anything. She never left too much of an impact on the characters. I just think she was a really badass character that I would have loved to have seen more of. In terms of Kazai's brother, I'll put him in like a mid D. I thought he was just, he's hyped up for like 4 or 5 episodes as being this, this big deal where it's like, oh, Kazai's brother's coming. He's gonna be a problem, and then he shows up and he gets shot in the head, if I remember right, by like an earth gun, and that's kind of it. It's kind of an underwhelming way to take out this guy you're hopping up. I'd put Kazai's dad in a low C though, because I know he was just in the one episode, I think it was episode 22, no, 22 was the final, episode 21, I want to say, where Daisy gets sent to him, and he has this cold speech with Talbot. He's not necessarily a villain, because he's never really, like, the bad guy. Which, speaking of, there's actually, I'm realizing there's a couple of the people who were on that ship with Kazai's dad that I almost messed up the name there. With Kazai's dad, who was that guy? He was like the captain of the ship as well. I don't know. He was leading those guys, and he's not on the list anyway. I don't know where I'd put him anyway. But Kazai's dad, I think he left more of an impact than Kazai's brother did, for sure. Now, Kazai's kind of a little bitch, if I'm honest. He was screaming a lot. He was yelling a lot. I feel like a high C is too low, because I feel like he's better than a lot of these characters in C. So I'd say like a low B maybe. Thing as well is like, if you're a main villain, it's hard to kind of put you anywhere lower than a B, because there's so much more of you than there is like, would say, Donnie Gill or Hellfire. But Kazai's, he was just kind of an annoying character. The show did that thing in episode 9, I want to say, where Mac blows up the part of the lighthouse, and he's like, no, we're just getting started. And Kazai's does his little scream, and the camera like zooms in and shakes, which is really goofy. But I mean, that was the point. They were trying to make it look goofy. I mean, yeah, Kazai's kind of just whatever. I felt like in terms of the season 5 main antagonists, he was kind of the most underwhelming. He was kind of the most whatever. Okay, next up, I guess we'll stay on season 5 for a sec. We'll do Grill, I think was this guy's name. This guy was an asshole. The one who was kind of capturing Inhumans or capturing people or whatever to give to the Kree. He was one of the conspirators, or what do they call them? I don't know. There's a word for people who work with an occupying force or whatever, who then get their shit kicked in when the occupying force is kicked out. Which I'm completely blanking on the name. I feel like I should know that name because it's it's a common name. Anyway, I put him in like my ID. He just put him on ID because I just hated the character, which is annoying because I think the actor's really cool because he played Otis in The Walking Dead, which I feel like was probably a bigger role for him than Grill in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But he's playing Jonathan Kent in the upcoming Superman film, which is really, really, really cool to see him go from a brief mini role in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5 to being in the Superman film. Like, that's a huge upgrade, which, I mean, the Superman film is kind of, in general, seems to be doing a lot of TV actors, so it makes sense to kind of pull from there, which I don't know why we're talking about Superman. Why does this always happen? Why do I always start talking about Superman? Anyway, Grill was really cool. No, Grill was not really cool. Superman was really cool. Grill is terrible. He's the worst. And he gets a D because he's the worst. The other season 5 guy from that sort of arc was Samuel Voss, who I'm going to put in a low C just because there's that brief stuff where he's like kind of sympathetic, where he's talking about how he needs to kind of stop I don't know what he was talking about. He killed, yeah, did kill Robin, which that wasn't great. That was kind of not cool because Robin was just kind of an old lady at that point, a really like sweet old lady who was just trying to help the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents get back home and help them stop the time loop, and that wasn't cool of him to do that. But I feel like Grill was just an asshole just for the sake of being an asshole. He was in it for completely selfish reasons, and I don't justify what Voss did, but at least he had the mindset of he was doing it to save humanity, where he was like, look, if the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. don't get home, this never happened in the first place, so we're fine. So in his head, he was justifying it like killing Robin for the greater good, whereas Grill was just like, I'm an asshole. So yeah, Voss gets a low C, while Grill gets a high D. Which, I'll be honest, I feel like a lot of the C and D, even some of the B stuff is kind of just, I'm saying it's ranked in order, but I feel like I'm just throwing them wherever, because I feel like if a lot of these smaller characters, it's really hard to order. But I feel like A and S is going to be pretty consistent with like how I feel about them. All right, next up we got Ramon, who, don't blame me if you get who Ramon was, super minor antagonist in season 3. Reason why I put him in here and didn't not include him like a lot of other minor antagonists is because he was the main villain of the Slingshot spin-off. He was the Slingshot was the 6 episode, 6 minutes each episode, sort of, I don't know, weird spin-off thing that they did, and it was alright, it was solid, but he was the villain of that, which I feel like gets him a spot on this list, you know, because he essentially had a whole Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, or season, if you want to call Slingshot that, to himself. I'd put him in like, I'd put him both packs. Put him there. He was alright. He's there holding the weapon from 082, which makes the, you know, the thing that Reyes was there for. So that's cool. But yeah, he's kind of whatever. You know what? Let's speedrun some of these. I feel like I'm taking a long time to get through the minor characters. All right. This is Atara, I believe, from season 6. So I'm going to include her on the season 6 Chronocoms together. I will say, season 6 Chronocoms, sorry, are the worst part of season 6 in my opinion. Similarly, I think the Chronocoms are the worst part of season 7. I think the Chronocoms, I don't know, look, this might be a hot take, I'm not sure. I think the more Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started to delve into the Chronocoms, the more the quality went down a little bit. Not to say I dislike season 6 or 7, because I obviously don't, but I do think as villains, they weren't the most enjoyable or satisfying kind of bad guys to have our team go up against when they'd been fighting so many villains that were personal and meant something to the team, like Grant Ward, John Garrett. Two people who meant loads to, like, Grant had so much to do with Skye and May. John Garrett had so much to do with Coulson. Then we get like Glenn Talbot, who meant so much to the team due to their history and stuff like that. I feel like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was really good at having personal villains. Similarly, Leopold is the Doctor. But in season 6 and 7, it did feel like they sort of dropped the personal bit a little bit outside of Sarge, obviously, since he looked like Coulson. But the Chronicom stuff didn't feel like it was super personal. It just felt like this was this alien, faceless species in a lot of ways coming up against our team, and they have to try and stop them. So I will say I'm probably going to put Sybil on the season 7 Chronicoms. I put them above the season 6 ones, but I also did not think that they were good at all. I thought that they were kind of some of the weaker parts of season 7. Then we have Malachi as well, who was like the hunter for the Chronicoms. He was cool cause the actor. I remember him from Stargirl, who played Brainwave, I believe, was the villain he played of the Injustice Society. I'd put him like there as well. I think that all of the Chronicoms kind of get a high C together. Speaking of season 7 villains, I guess let's do Nathaniel Malik next. And I'm going to put Nathaniel Malik in the bottom slot because he is the most annoying character on the entire show. I am sorry. I hated that guy. And I don't mean I hated him in a, you know, the way you want to hate villains, you want to see them lose or whatever. I just didn't think Nathaniel Malik was fun to watch. You know, you can hate a villain but find them fun to watch. I didn't think Malik was fun to watch at all. I was genuinely hoping there was going to be a huge switch up during season 7 where they'd reveal that he wasn't actually the main villain and somebody else is going to come out on top, or that he's actually working for somebody else, or something, or like I don't know, just one of the traditional Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. twists, because I was so fed up with his character. And I remember there was this thing where it was like, it was even a running joke in the fandom at the time, where from episode 6, I want to say onwards, pretty much every episode would end with a credit scene. You know that they do the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. logo, we'll return in a moment, and then they show a scene at the very end. For like 5 or 6 episodes straight, every single time they'd cut, there'd be a scene with Nathaniel Malik scheming or doing something weird. And like, we just would watch one of the most, I don't know, heartbreaking moments of the entire show. Like in episode 9 when Enoch dies, we just see one of the most emotional episodes of the entire show. Episode ends, we'll return in a moment. And then it's just Nathaniel Malik training Korra or something like that. And it was just, they were constantly doing this every single episode, and it just made me hate the character. It just made me hate his face. I was like, I don't know. I just season 7 to me, I think, is really, really, really good from an individual episode standpoint. I think generally the individual episodes are really fun, but the more it digs into the main villain stuff, the less I'm interested in it, the less I care. And since we're on Nathaniel Malik, we'll do Cora next, since she was a villain for most of season 7 up until the final episode. Where is Cora? Where is Cora? Where did I put her? There she is. I'm gonna put Cora in a low C though, just because I feel like the twist where she then joined up with Shield at the very end made her a bit more of a satisfying character than Nathaniel Malik was, where he was just somebody who stole Daisy's powers and, I don't know, ended up being their final bad guy to fight, and that was a little disappointing to me. Okay, let's speedrun some more of these small ones. Let's do the season 2 Inhumans next. So I would say Gordon, kind of cool. I kind of like Gordon. I thought he was a bit of a badass, honestly. I'd put him above Sonara, maybe even. I thought Gordon was awesome. The scene in the season 2 finale where and Mac's sitting there with the axe and Gordon shows up and Mac's like, you must be Gordon. And Gordon's like, who are you? And Mac's like, I'm the guy who kills Gordon. And he doesn't even kill Gordon. Mac doesn't even do that. And he immediately gets his head bonked by Gordon by the teleporting thing. But I don't know, I just feel like every time Gordon showed up, you were in for a really badass cool scene. And I thought it was really, really, really fun to watch him be up to those shenanigans all the time. It was really fun. We have I'm blanking on her name, Alicia, I think her name was. The other Inhuman from that arc who had the like she could make doubles of herself or triples of herself, I should say. I thought she was kind of whatever. I'll put her in like a high C, I think. She was kind of whatever. And we have Jiaying, who, as being Daisy's mother, again, like we said, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. early on was really good at making villains personal, and two of the villains of season 2 were Daisy's mother and father, and I think they did a really good job at that. I'd probably put Jiaying in a high B, because I do think some of the Inhuman stuff got a little iffy. The Inhuman stuff towards the end of season 2 is probably my least favorite part of season 2. I think when we get into afterlife and that sort of stuff, the season does start to lose a little bit of its steam, but it's still really, 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 really good stuff. And I feel like Jiaying could have been a stronger villain, but ultimately didn't completely reach that mark. Since we're on season 2, let's do Cal next, who is Daisy's father, or also known as Mr. Hyde, and I fucking love Cal. I think he's the funniest guy on the show. The way he's in the last episodes of season 2 when he gets the serum in him and he's just jumping around and he's just like running after Fitz, Simmons, and Coulson is so funny. I think he's a really, really, really fun character to watch. Like I don't know, just really, really I'm gonna put him in an S. I'm gonna put Cal in an S. That might be a bit. That might get some people rustled. I think Cal was a really fun villain. Let's do some of the season 6 people next. So we got Sarge and we got Izel. Izel could have been much stronger. I'd put her in a high B. She was fine. I think that the Izel and the Shrike aspect of the season was much stronger than the Chronicom stuff. I think like if the entire season was more focused on just Izel and the Shrike stuff, I would have preferred it than the side plot to Fitz, Simmons, Enoch, and the Chronicoms. Sarge, I thought was awesome. I did really like Sarge. I thought having him as, the face of Coulson and everything that kind of comes with that was really, really, really great. I thought it added this extra bit of weight that the show kind of needed going into season 6, because I mean, sure, they could have had an entire season without Clark Gregg, but season 6 already feels like a bit of an outlier season in terms of the other 6 seasons. So I think not having Clark Gregg at all would have made for a bit of a whiplash, kind of where you're like looking back at it as like the only season that doesn't include him. And I think it's a really smart choice to not have just brought Coulson back. I think bringing him in as a villain who was tied to the monoliths and the Ghost Rider stuff from season 5 was really, really, really intelligent, really smart way to bring him back that made sense for what was going on. All right, next up, let's do Reyna, who was a villain in seasons 1 and 2. Honestly, felt Reyna was a little bit annoying after a certain point. I think what they call her, the lady in the flower dress or whatever. Um, I think she was fine to a point, and then I feel like once the Inhuman stuff got in and she got her powers and she started looking like Sonic the Hedgehog a little bit, I think I was kind of over her character, and thankfully that was when they wrote her out. But I did feel like maybe it came in a little bit too late. Right. Next up, let's do two characters here who were very tied together. We'll do Kara, aka Agent 33 first. I thought she was a great character. I genuinely was really interested. I would have loved to see her be on the show longer, like to see her continue into season 3 and 4. It would have been really cool to see kind of a situation where Grant dies in season 3 like usual, but Kara doesn't die, and see how that informs her character and what they did with her going forward. But in general, she was just a supporting character there to push Ward along and to kind of give him motivation in season 3 to go full Total War methodology after Shield, because in season 2, sure, he was being a villain, but he wasn't exactly a full-on villain yet. He was helping to get Bobby just because Bobby was the one who handed Kara over to Hydra. He wasn't necessarily doing it out of a malicious attempt to destroy Shield. Shouldn't have done it still, but there was a reason behind it. And then once Kara dies, Grant just goes completely off the rails and just becomes the villain to Shield. And I feel like that maybe doesn't do Kara's character the best service, but I really enjoyed watching her. I thought she was really fun as she was in the show. Now, next we got Grant Ward. I know his head's cut off there, but that's Grant Ward. Wearing what I think is his coolest outfit in the whole show, which is that like dark brown jacket and the jeans and just the way he stands. I don't know. That's kind of how I want to look, honestly. That's like how I feel. Like that's kind of my ideal outfit right there. Is like what I want to wear. And I don't know. I feel like I've talked about Grant Ward 101 times on this channel. And he is still one of my favorite characters on the show. Now look, I'm not supporting Hydra. I'm not supporting any of that bullshit. But Brett Dalton plays Grant Ward so fucking well. And he's such a fun character to watch. And every time he's on screen, I'm just like giggling and kicking my feet up. Where I'm like, oh, what's Ward gonna do next? What's he gonna do? Who's he gonna mess with this time? And he's such a dickhead, but he's such a dickhead in a fun way to watch, where it's like, there's that stuff in season 2 where he briefly rejoins the Shield team in one of my favorite episodes of the show, The Dirty Half Dozen, season 2, episode 19. And in that episode, we've got the original members all standing around the Shield table on the remnants of the bus. And he's just like, look, I know we've all made mistakes. People got hurt. And Fitz and stuff like that are just like, yeah, by you. And Grant's like, look, I'm not here to point fingers or to say anything, but this is what I miss. I miss all of us being here. And it's just such a funny moment where nobody is buying into his bullshit anymore. Everybody knows what he is now. Grant realizes he can't swing the bullshit anymore. But it's funny watching him get in those situations where he's trying to say a little bit of bullshit, trying to convince people that he's not who he says he is. But, I mean, he is. And it's just, I don't know. I think he's always going to be my favorite Marvel villain. I think just the personality to him, the stakes to him, kind of, we get a little look into his backstory, which, I mean, I don't think his backstory really makes anything he does okay, but it's fun to kind of get that little look into his life. And he is the villain that is on the show the longest, for 3 seasons. I know he wasn't always a villain during that time, but he was on the show for 3 seasons, showed up again in season 4 in the framework. Just a fun character to watch. And yeah, if anybody disagrees, I understand, but Grant Ward is like thebomb.com. Darren says it all the time, and I feel like he'd be proud if he watches this video. He'd be proud of me saying that. Anyway, let's do Deathlock next. I know this is the image of him from season 5 here, but he was only a villain in season 1. He was fine. I'll put him a low B. Probably put him above Cassius. Probably above Lucy. Yeah, but there. High B. Mid B. Deathlock was fine. He was much better as like a character that they teamed up with sometimes than a straight up villain. Let's do Andrew Garner, aka Lash. I thought Lash was awesome. There's a moment in the season 3 mid-season finale where I can't remember who's in the pod beside him. I want to say it was Simmons in the pod beside him, who Hydra had kidnapped. And Hydra opens the pod that Lash is in. And, you know, Lash is in Andrew Garner mode, and he starts slowly backing up, and you can see him just transform while he's slowly backing up. And it's just a really cool moment. I thought he was a badass character, slightly turned back to the good side at the very end by saving but saving Daisy and taking Hive's influence off of her. And yeah, no, just a really good character. I thought the connection he had with May made him for a more enjoyable character than usual. Next up, let's do was this guy Shockley, the leader of the Watchdogs, along with the Superior. He turned into that guy who could explode in season 4, and he was eh. Put him in like a mid C. He kind of was just there to push along story. This is the Superior as well, Anton Ivanov, or we're talking about the Watchdogs. I thought I'd give him a high B. I don't think I'd put him like up into an A. Come on, there we go. I don't think I'd put him up into an A, but I think he was a reasonably fun character to watch, and the actor is so good. He's in so many things I watch. He was in The Walking Dead. He's Charles Vane in Black Sails, which I'm always shouting that show out, but watch Black Sails if you haven't seen it. But he was fun to watch. The Russian, the Superior, Anton Ivanov, whatever you want to call him. He comes back in season 5 as part of Hale's team, so we'll do Hale next. Who I'd put Hale in a B as well, but I'd probably put her, yeah, about there. I think Hale was fine, but it was just season 5 at that point. We were kind of getting to the point where it was like pretty much 5 seasons in a row with Hydra as a central antagonist, and I feel like people are kind of getting fed up of it at this point. I remember kind of watching some people who reacted to the show later on, and like the Normies is one of the reaction channels I was really into when they were going through Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I remember they watched the episode where Hale reveals she's Hydra, and as soon as she says Hale Hydra, they all kind of groaned and were like, not again. And it wasn't like in a not again in like an uh-oh, they're doing it sort of thing. It was a not again in a, are they seriously doing Hydra again? And I feel like that was kind of a method to the show where it's like, yeah, you know, cut off 2 heads, or cut off 1 head, 2 more will take its place kind of thing. That was always the Hydra motto or whatever. But I feel like at a certain point, they did kind of get a little bit overused, and I think Hale was sort of a symptom of that. Let's do our daughter next, Ruby, who I liked Ruby less than Hale, honestly. Ruby was also in kind of similar to Nathaniel Malik, where she was kind of an annoying character in a way that I was really, really, really waiting for there to be a twist that she wasn't the actual villain we were going to fight. Thankfully, in season 5, they did that twist, and it turned out to be Glenn Talbot. But I remember when Ruby was kind of revealed to be the destroyer of worlds or whatever, and they were kind of tricking us down that path. I was kind of upset by it a little bit. I wasn't upset, but I was kind of like, I don't know if I like the idea of her being the final villain. She's kind of just, I don't know. She cut off Yo-Yo's hands or arms. She was just being kind of annoying, where she was like, I don't want to beat you, Daisy. I want to be you. And it was like, I don't care about that. Let's not do that, please. And thankfully they didn't keep that going for long. Next up, I've got Hydra May here. If people are wondering why May is here, May was super briefly a villain in season 4 for the framework stuff at the very beginning. And I thought she was a really, I mean, it's weird because Hydra May, they kind of just played her off very similarly to like early season 1 May, where she's not exactly evil. She's just cold, a little bit emotionless, doesn't really want to deal with people. And that's kind of what they give her here. Now, she isn't a villain for long. It's like 2 or 3 episodes before she starts to kind of turn. So I can't really put her too high because we don't really see much of her. But put her maybe, I'd say just above Alistair Fitz and behind Hale. Okay, so we got 13 characters left. All right, let's speedrun some of these. I know I've said it like 5 times. I know my speedruns in my vocabulary today. Anyway, we got Robert Gonzalez and the Real Shield. I know a lot of people might not consider them as like main villains or whatever, but there was this middle part in season 2 where Daniel Whitehall and that whole part of Hydra was kind of taken care of, and the Inhumans in Afterlife hadn't really come in as the antagonists yet. And during this little brief interlude, we had Robert Gonzalez kind of leading the Real Shield as sort of the antagonists to the main characters. Even if they were not bad guys, they still were in an antagonist area for a bit. If I'm honest, really, really, really kind of enjoyed this storyline. I kind of enjoyed seeing the difference between the 2 versions of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'd honestly put Gonzalez. I know we don't see him really fully as an antagonist, but in terms of just the Real Shield, I honestly thought that they were really good villains. I'd put them like maybe between like Hale and Hydra May, where it was cool to see the difference between how Gonzalez is taking his approach, how Coulson's taking his approach, getting the flashbacks to what brought all of the characters here. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really, really good stuff. Okay, next up, this is Werner von Strucker, I believe. I know a lot of their heads are cut off. I probably should have cropped some of these pictures. But this is Werner von Strucker, who is the son of the main Von Strucker from Age of Ultron, and he was kind of nothing of a character, I felt like. I think a low C probably suits him pretty well. Um, every time he showed up, it was just kind of to work for someone else. He wasn't really standing out on his own. At first, he showed up so that he could work with Ward and Ward's Hydra friend, who's also in here somewhere. What's his name? Rebo? I don't know. Anyway, that guy. Well, you know what? He's going in a D, by the way. This is Ward's Hydra friend from season 3 and late season 2, which I forget now. Rebo, I think, is his name, right? He's getting like a low D. But yeah, Werner von Strucker, I don't know. He was there with Ward, then he was there with Ruby, and then Ruby killed him, and that was that. Wasn't really a lot else to his character. We have Dr. List, speaking of the Von Strucker stuff. List appeared in Age of Ultron, but he also appeared super late in season 3 of the main show. Or season 2 of the main show, sorry, I should say. And yeah, kind of a whatever character, just another Hydra name, but with not really much behind them. Probably give him like a low C as well, right around Von Strucker. Then we'll do Bakshi, I guess, since we're doing the Hydra guys. So Sunil Bakshi was much better than the usual Hydra people, like the usual one-off Hydra people. We got Bakshi for most of season 2, as well as he returned in one episode of season 4 in the framework, which was really fun. But I thought Bakshi was a fun little villain. I probably put him about mid B. It's super brainwashed, super committed to Hydra, super committed to Whitehall, who we're going to bring in, and I'm going to put Whitehall in like a high A. Despicable character. Like, come on, Gordon, get the hell back there. Despicable character. You hated everything about him. You were terrified of him, but it worked really, really, really well. Where it just, he's the kind of villain you hated, but not hated in the way, I hated Nathaniel Malik, where Malik was just annoying to watch. Whitehall was not annoying to watch. You hated the character, but you kind of liked to see what he was going to do next and see what was going to happen with him. I thought that was really, really, really good. Okay, next up we'll do Hive. So we have Grant Ward as normal, and then Hive once Ward dies. I think Hive's a big part of the reason why I don't like season 3 as much as some of the other seasons. I think Hive is kind of a fairly bland villain. I might rejig some of these here. Honestly, I might put Hive there and maybe put Cassius there behind Hive. I just feel like it's not fair to have some of these really smaller villains kind of in the way of the bigger villains if they're in the same letter grade, if that makes sense. But yeah, I wish I had more to say about him. I thought the backstory about making him sort of the king of the Inhumans, or like the original Inhuman, was really, really, really cool. You could tell that they were kind of digging into a little bit of X-Men mutant lore there and sort of taking some of that and placing it onto the Inhumans with, I guess you could make a lot of the comparisons with like Apocalypse in X-Men and Hive in the Inhumans, and obviously Marvel Studios at the time couldn't use X-Men related stuff in their TV shows. But yeah, I mean, he was fine, but if we're comparing him to like other main villains, I don't think he was super enjoyable. And next we'll do John Garrett, aka the Clairvoyant. I loved Garrett. I thought he was really, really, really fun as a villain. I'd put him in an S, honestly. I think the actor as well is just fantastic. Rest in peace. He was really, really, really fun. And I know we don't get to see him as a villain for much. It's like 4 or 5 episodes at the very end of season 1, but kind of the dynamic him and Ward have is really enjoyable and really fun to watch. It kind of it's really, really, really good. And some of the I feel like when John Garrett makes his turn, kind of where he starts to become the villain, it's sort of when the show switches into being like, okay, this is actually good. It's kind of he makes that switch at the exact time as the show is starting to pull out of the episodic format, and you're starting to kind of see the character writing that they're really capable of. And I think that Garrett's the first sort of indicator of that, where you can tell that they've got some really cool, character villains going on and character moments going on. I don't know why we left Carl Cruelton out, because he's a Absorbing Man is a very small villain, appearing in seasons 2 and 5, and both times in fairly small capacities. I think he was one of the more interesting recurring villains, though. I'd probably put him about there on a B. I think he was fine. Shows up during the Gravitonium stuff in season 5, which was a cool to bring him back. And he sort of joins the good guys very, very shortly before his demise in season 5. But he's an interesting character because he's mentioned in Daredevil a bunch of times as the person who battling Jack Murdock, who's Matt Murdock's father, fights in his very last battle or his very last fight before Jack Murdock is killed. And he was recently mentioned in a Loki deleted scene, which could be a different Absorbing Man, could be a different character. In the comics, Absorbing Man has connections to Loki, so it could be just to do with that and nothing more than a fun little Easter egg. But it's fun to think about maybe this guy actually dealt with Loki at one point before he died. That would be crazy. Um, okay, so we got Holden Radcliffe, the Doctor, Ada, and Gideon Malik. So three from season 4 and one from season 3. Gideon Malik, the actor who played in Paris Booth, is fantastic. I'd give him like a high A just behind Whitehall. I think I thought he was a really 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 good villain. I think the idea of bringing Paris Booth back after playing a super minor cameo role in the Avengers and bringing him in to be a villain in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3 was fantastic. Because Paris Booth is an amazing actor, and it's not like he wasn't well known before Avengers. He was in a lot of great stuff before Avengers. He is fantastic in a show Deadwood, a HBO Western show from the early 2000s, one of my favorite shows of all time. And he's a main character throughout most of that, and he's fantastic in it. So he was a fairly well-known actor coming into Avengers, and then Avengers barely used him, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was like, okay, wait, they barely used him. Maybe we can do something with this. And they brought him in, and I thought that was really, really, really smart. I should mention while we're talking about Gideon, I don't have Rosalind in here or the ATCU, because I don't know. I know that they were sort of in an antagonist role for the first 2 or 3 episodes of season 3, but I do feel like they pretty quickly. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm hypocritical for not including them, but including people like Gonzalez and the Real Shield. But I feel like the ATCU were never exactly the antagonists. Lash was sort of the antagonist of those early episodes. Same with Grant Ward and Rebo, and that might not even be his name. One second, let me double check that because I'm starting to wonder if that is not even his name, and I'm just saying I'm just saying words. Because I wrote down everybody's name just like of the minor people to make sure I remembered who everyone was. And I feel like I said that guy's name was Rebo, but his name's Kibo or Cabo or whatever with a K, not an or. I'm thinking of Max Rebo, you know, the Star Wars elephant character or whatever that's in Return of the Jedi. That's who I'm thinking of. Not Kibo. So Kibo's the Hydra guy. Um, what were we talking about? I got so completely sidetracked there. Yeah, no, bring up Paris Booth then. The ATCU, yeah. So I think in early season 3, the ATCU and Rosalind were never really the main antagonists of early season 3. It was still people like Grant Ward and Hydra and Gideon Malik slowly getting introduced and Werner von Strucker and Lash, Andrew Garner. I think those were the main villains, with the ATCU there to kind of be a red herring and sort of throw us off who we think the main villains are going to be, because Coulson and Rosalind hit it off pretty quickly. Whereas in season 2 with Gonzalez and the Real Shield, there is a section of the show there that's like 4 or 5 episodes long where the Real Shield is the central antagonists in the background. Like they're building them up to be the villains in the background. So I do think that that's sort of why I didn't include Rosalind here. But yeah, Gideon Malik, great character, really good. I think his death scene is brutal and one of the scariest of the show. I also maybe should have included Gideon Malik's daughter, was it? The woman who had that weird kissing scene with Grant Ward as Hive or whatever. I don't know. Maybe I should have included her. Let's do Holden Radcliffe next. I think Radcliffe was also good, similar because I really like the actor. I'd probably put him in like a low A. Thought he was enjoyable to watch. I really, really, really like what they did with him at the end of season 4 in the framework. The final scene with him where he's there sitting on the beach with the glass and he's like, "So this is how it ends, not with a bang, but and then just nothing." It's really, really, really good. I love that ending. It's one of the best endings for any character on the show, I think. But Radcliffe is really enjoyable. I really liked what they did with him. He was a piece of shit for sure, but I mean, most of these villains are pieces of shit, and I like that they sort of made it believable why he was doing what he was doing and the way he was going about it, and with the backstory with Ophelia and stuff like that. Bit creepy, but that he was going through all that effort for that sort of stuff. But I do think that they made it compelling. They made it a compelling story. Speaking of Ophelia or Ada or Madam Hydra, whatever you want to call her, we got Ada, and of course, she's going in S. Most people consider her better than Grant Ward. Very understandable. I got a little soft spot for Grant Ward, I'm sorry. But Ada as number 2 Ada is easily the second best villain on the show for me. And depending on the week, she could be my favorite villain on the show. But I would say she's my second favorite MCU villain of all time. It probably goes Grant Ward, Ada, Kilgrave from Jessica Jones, then the Doctor, then Fisk. So I kind of just spoiled there that we're going to put the Doctor in S as well. But Ada was fantastic. The actress who played her is unbelievable. Mallory Jansen plays so many different versions of this character in the final couple episodes, or in the whole season. Like we see the robotic Ada, we see her as Ophelia, who's this person from before everything, just this woman trying to live her life and just trying to stay away from Radcliffe and all that sort of stuff. Then we see her as Madame Hydra inside of the framework, where she's just this evil, terrifying woman. And then we see her in the final few episodes where she is Ophelia. You know what? I'm completely mixing up. She's Agnes beforehand. It's Ophelia when she becomes an Inhuman at the very end of the season and she gets a real life body. Agnes is the version that Holden Radcliffe is obsessed with and was before Ada and what Ada is modeled after. Then she becomes Ada, then it's Madame Hydra, then it's Ophelia. Okay, sorry, that's my bad there. I should remember that. But just seeing her go through all those different characters is fantastic. The final two episodes of season 4 are two of the best episodes of the whole show. Having her freak out when Fitz says that he's choosing Gemma over her, and she's like, "No, I chose you. Now you choose me," and that sort of stuff, and just losing her mind and just going crazy. And then Fitz banging on the windows of the pod saying she can't be stopped. It's terrifying. It's amazing. It's so well done. And it's she's a ginormous reason why season 4 is the best thing Marvel's ever made, in my opinion. Like it as just either a movie or a TV show. Season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the best thing that's Marvel have ever made. And I think that Ada or Ophelia or Agnes or Madame Hydra is why. Like she makes up so much of what is fantastic about this season. And speaking of her, we'll go with her lover, Leopold, aka the Doctor, the evil version of Fitz, who gets the third spot. You know, we don't see much of him. We see him in the last 7 or so episodes of season 4. Then we see him once in season 5 when Fitz has the split in the great episode, The Devil's Complex. And then we see him in season 6 inside Gemma and Fitz's heads when they're having their little mind prism thing inside the Chronicoms. But he's an amazing villain. Ian plays him unbelievably well. This is kind of when you get to see a lot of the real, I don't know, you get to see his acting come out and play, because we've seen him do some amazing stuff, like early season 3 when he's going after Gemma, after she gets sent to Maveth. Season 2 when he's got the brain damage and he's trying to get around that. You know, fantastic acting from him. But in season 4, when he fully gets to play and be a villain, just showcases how unbelievably fantastic he is and how he's potentially the best actor out of the main cast on the show. Everyone's fantastic, but I think Ian might just be the best, just due to how many different kind of characters he gets to play and the changes between them as he goes forward, and how much he changes from seasons 1 to 7 and the splits and all that sort of stuff. And I think, you know, the Doctor is a great example of that, of just, this is who he is. Anyway, there we go. We ranked 63 Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. villains in tier rankings. This isn't a definitive list. I'm for sure thinking if I rewatch the show, a lot of these smaller characters will probably change and shift around. I do feel bad that there's so many people like C and D, but then not a whole lot in SNA. But I do feel like we got a big chunk of the main villains in SNA, and then other ones going like B. There's not a lot of the main villains that ended up in C or D, except for ones I'm really not okay with. But I would be really interested in hearing how other people feel about this villain tier ranking. Like, is it similar to how you would put things? Is it different? Are there any here that you're like, no way, that is so much different, that needs to be changed now? Or is there any you're like, yeah, that's absolutely on point? I feel like people like Ada, Grant Ward, the Doctor, people are probably going to agree that they should be an S. I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts on like Nathaniel Malik and Cora and stuff like that. Like, them being in low C's and D's, does that work for you or not so much? Anyway, let me know all of that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. I don't know why you would watch, I don't know, how long was this? An hour long of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff without subscribing, because I make this stuff every week, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. videos every week. So make sure you're around for that. And if you are subscribed, make sure to like and share and do all of that great stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day.